My name is Ahmad, and for most of my life, I believed I had it all figured out. I was born into a Muslim family, raised in a home that reverberated with the rhythm of prayer 5 times a day. My parents taught me that the path to peace and salvation was through devotion to Allah, through the guidance of the Quran. They raised me with love, with purpose, but also with an unyielding devotion to our faith. For years, I followed the steps laid out for me, believing that I was living my truth. I was proud of my faith, proud of my identity. But as I grew older, I began to notice something that I couldn't shake. I was living a life that seemed perfect from the outside, but inside I felt like something was missing. Every prayer I said, every fast I kept, it all felt routine. The peace I had been promised seemed so far away, just out of reach. It was like I was running a race, but no matter how hard I tried, I could never cross the finish line. I had this constant feeling that I was doing everything I was supposed to, but something deep inside me wasn't at rest. I couldn't explain it, this nagging emptiness that kept me up at night. I started questioning everything I had been taught. What if there was more to life than this? What if all the answers I had been given were incomplete? I began searching, trying to fill the void. I turned to reading, to philosophy, to new ways of thinking, but nothing seemed to satisfy. Nothing brought the peace I was desperately seeking. And then, one day, everything changed. It was a typical evening in the city, the streets buzzing with the sounds of life, but I felt disconnected from it all. That night, I went to bed like any other night, unaware that it would be the night that would alter my life forever. It started with a sharp pain in my chest, unlike anything I had ever felt. I tried to ignore it at first, thinking it would pass, but it only grew worse. In those moments, I knew something was terribly wrong. I felt my body shutting down. I could hear my heart beating erratically, faster, then slower. Then a strange calm washed over me, and everything around me seemed to fade into silence. It was in that moment, that breathless, still moment, that I felt my spirit leave my body. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't even confused. It was as if I had been expecting it all along, but never truly acknowledging it. I was floating, above myself, looking down at my lifeless body in bed. I wasn't in pain. I wasn't sad. I was just suspended in time, in the stillness of that strange space. And then, something happened, something I could never have imagined. The air around me seemed to shimmer, as if reality itself was changing. Suddenly, I was no longer alone. I was in the presence of a figure, a man standing before me, radiating warmth and light. His presence was overwhelming, but not in a way that frightened me. His eyes were full of love, a love I had never known before, and I felt something deep inside me stir. He spoke without words, but his message was clear. He was here for me. I could feel it in every fiber of my being. The weight of my life, the years of questioning, of searching, and the emptiness I had carried with me. It all came rushing forward. And in that moment, I knew who he was. I knew, with every ounce of my soul, that this was Jesus Christ, the man I had heard of, the man I had read about in the Quran, but never truly understood, the man whose love and sacrifice I had never fully grasped. And then he reached out to me. His touch was like nothing I had ever felt, pure, healing, and transformative. I was no longer alone. I was no longer empty. In that touch, in that moment, I felt a love that transcended everything I had known. And it was in that love that I realized the answer I'd been searching for all my life was standing before me. It wasn't in the rituals, it wasn't in the traditions, it was in Christ's love, and I was being called to something greater than I had ever imagined. You see, I spent my life searching for peace, for understanding, for a way to fill the emptiness in my heart. I thought I would find it through religion, through tradition, but I had missed the most important truth of all. Peace doesn't come from what we do. It comes from who we know. And I had just met the source of that peace. At that moment, my life changed forever. I knew that I had encountered the truth. Jesus was real. His love was real. And in that encounter, I understood that the journey I had been on all my life had led me to this moment. Not by chance, but by design. God had been with me all along, guiding me, calling me. I want to share this with you because I know that many of you, like me, are searching. You're searching for peace, for meaning, for hope. I want you to know from the depths of my heart that peace is not found in what we do, but in who we accept. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And in Him, we find everything we've been longing for. Before all of that happened, the light, the love, the peace, I had been living a life like any other. My days were consumed by routine. I'd wake up early for Fajr prayer, go about my work, and follow the motions of my life. I didn't feel alive, but I didn't feel dead either. It was as if I was simply existing. I did what was expected of me, but there was no joy. I could feel the emptiness creeping in, slowly draining me, but I didn't know where to turn. I couldn't explain why, but every night, I felt like I was losing myself a little more. That night, it was different. I had just finished dinner, my family was gathered around the table, and everything seemed ordinary. But even as I smiled, I could feel something deep inside me stirring, a sense of dread that had no clear origin. My chest tightened, like something invisible was closing in on me. I dismissed it, chalking it up to stress, but as I sat back in my chair, I felt a pressure, a suffocating weight, building in my chest. It felt like my heart was pounding harder than usual, like I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just a discomfort anymore. It was real. It was powerful. My heart was racing, faster, faster, until it felt like it was going to burst. My breaths came in shallow gasps, and the room around me seemed to grow smaller, closing in. I couldn't focus on anything. The sound of my own heartbeat drowned out everything else. I was drowning in my own body, in my own fear. I remember trying to stand up, trying to speak, but the words wouldn't come. It felt like I was locked inside myself, like my body wasn't mine anymore. Panic gripped me. I couldn't control it. I was having a panic attack. At least, that's what I thought it was. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. This wasn't just anxiety. This was something else. My mind raced, and I couldn't make sense of anything. I thought about all the things that had been bothering me, my spiritual struggles, the feeling of emptiness I'd carried for so long, the quiet despair that no one seemed to see. And then, just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, something happened. A voice, a whisper, barely audible, pierced through the chaos in my mind. It wasn't an external sound. It was more like a thought, clear and direct, coming from deep within. It wasn't a voice I recognized. It wasn't anyone I had ever heard before. But the words were unmistakable. You are not alone. I remember looking around, but no one else seemed to hear it. My family was still chatting, unaware of the storm raging inside me. But the words kept repeating in my mind, "You are not alone." They filled every inch of my consciousness, and suddenly I could hear nothing else. It was as though the world around me vanished, leaving only that voice. And then everything changed. I felt the room shift, like the walls were no longer solid. The air itself seemed to vibrate with energy, and I felt as if I was being pulled somewhere far beyond the confines of this world. It wasn't a sudden jolt. It was slow, almost as if time itself was stretching, bending. My body remained where it was, but my consciousness was elsewhere, slipping between the cracks of reality and something else. At first, I didn't know what was happening. It was as if I was floating. My thoughts felt distant, like they were being carried on a breeze. The panic that had gripped me only moments before seemed to fade away, replaced by a strange calm. I could still feel my body, but it was as though I had stepped outside of it. I was no longer bound by my physical form. I could still see the faces of my family in the room, but it was like I was watching them from behind a veil. And then, just like that, I was no longer in my living room. The world around me shifted. It wasn't dark, but it wasn't bright either. The place I found myself in was vast. It stretched beyond anything I could comprehend. I was standing in a space that seemed endless, and the air was thick with a presence I couldn't describe. It wasn't a place I recognized. It wasn't Earth. It was something otherworldly. At first, I didn't understand where I was or how I had gotten there. But then, I noticed something. There was a figure standing before me, a figure I had seen only in images, tall, with eyes that shone with love and sorrow, a figure whose presence was undeniable. I could feel the weight of his gaze, the depth of his eyes, as if he could see straight through me. I knew, without a doubt, that this was no ordinary man. This was Christ, and in that instant, everything I thought I knew about life, about faith, about myself, unraveled. I wanted to run, I wanted to escape, but I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. It wasn't just that he was looking at me, it was that he was seeing me, all of me. My fears, my regrets, my doubts, my soul. And in that gaze, I felt something shift within me. Something broken inside of me began to heal. I had come face to face with the truth, and I didn't know if I was ready for it. But I knew, somehow, that this was the moment I had been waiting for. This was the moment that would define the rest of my life. As I stood there, paralyzed by his gaze, I could feel the world around me change. The floor beneath my feet, if you could call it a floor, felt unstable, like the earth itself was shifting. At first, I didn't know what to make of it. My mind was still trying to catch up, trying to understand where I was. But the more I looked around, the more everything felt unfamiliar, disorienting. It was like I was standing in a place that wasn't supposed to exist, a place that existed only in stories and dreams. The air was thick, almost palpable, but it wasn't like the air I knew. It wasn't cold, but it was heavy, as though it carried the weight of every human sorrow, every unspoken prayer, and every moment of pain. It wasn't the air of a place bound by the laws of nature. It was the air of eternity, of something ancient, stretching far beyond what my human mind could comprehend. The ground beneath me didn't feel like earth. It was soft, almost as though it were alive. There was no grass, no dirt, but a kind of iridescent mist that swirled around my feet, as if the very ground was breathing, pulsing with a life of its own. The light was dim, but not in a way that felt dark. It was as though the light came from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Soft, ethereal, yet omnipresent. It didn't cast shadows. It simply was, filling the space without direction, as though it were a reflection of something divine that could not be fully contained in a form I could understand. I looked up. The sky wasn't like anything I had ever seen. It wasn't blue, but a swirling mixture of colors, shades of gold and purple, and a deep, infinite black. It felt like the sky was alive, like it was watching me, aware of my every move, my every thought. The stars, if you could call them stars, twinkled not in a way that felt distant, but as though they were close, alive, whispering to me. I could hear them, not with my ears, but with my soul. Each star seemed to carry a message, a song of hope, of longing, of peace, that I could barely grasp. The sky stretched endlessly, and I realized, with a jolt, that there was no horizon, no beginning, no end. It was a vast, infinite space that seemed to reflect the depth of my own heart, vast, searching, longing for something more. And then I saw something that made my heart stop. In the distance, rising from the mist, were towering figures. They weren't human. But they weren't like anything I had ever seen in the world I knew. They were statuesque, enormous, but their presence was gentle. They were made of what seemed to be light, but not the kind of light that blinds. This light was different. It was soft, warm, comforting, yet immense. The figures seemed to be watching over me, as though they were guardians of this place, protectors of this realm. I felt no fear, but only an overwhelming sense of reverence. And I knew deep down that these beings were a reflection of the presence that I had encountered. They were a symbol of the divine, of everything I had missed, of everything I had longed for. Then, as I looked closer, I saw what was lying beneath me. The mist wasn't just mist. It was like a reflection of the world, but not the world I had known. I saw images flicker in the mist, flashes of moments, of people, of events. There was something deeply personal about it, like I was seeing fragments of my own life and the lives of others. People I loved, people I had hurt, moments of joy, moments of regret. The mist showed me everything I had ever done, everything I had ever been, every choice, every mistake, every prayer, every silence. I realized then that this place, this space, was more than just a physical realm. It was a reflection of my soul. It was a mirror showing me the inner depths of my being, the things I had hidden, the things I had buried deep inside, my doubts, my fears, my anger. Everything was laid bare. But it wasn't harsh. It wasn't condemning. There was no judgment here, just an overwhelming sense of understanding. I wasn't being punished for my mistakes. Instead, I was being shown the truth of who I really was and who I could be. It was at that moment that I understood. The figures in the distance, the shimmering mist beneath me, they weren't just symbols of the divine. They were symbols of my own journey, the journey of every human soul, the struggle between light and darkness, between faith and doubt, between who we are and who we are meant to be. This place wasn't just otherworldly, it was symbolic. It reflected the very battle that we all face. And as I stood there, in this realm of mist and light, I knew that it wasn't just a place I'd stumbled into. It was the place where every soul must come face to face with themselves, with the choices they've made, and with the love that is always, always waiting for them. I had been searching my whole life for peace, for meaning, for the answers that would bring me closer to the truth. And here, in this place, I found the answer, not in the grand displays of power, not in the overwhelming force of nature, but in the simple, quiet truth that was unfolding before me. I was here because I had been called, not by fate, but by love, the kind of love that doesn't demand, but simply is. All the doubts I had carried, all the burdens, the questions, the empty spaces, they began to fade, not because they were gone, but because they were replaced by something greater, the realization that I was not alone, that I was loved, that the peace I had been searching for was not something to be earned, but something to be accepted. And the one who was offering it to me was Christ. I stood there, surrounded by the shimmering mist, feeling as though I had been there forever, but also as though I had just arrived. The silence was profound, yet it was not empty. It was filled with the kind of peace I had been seeking my entire life. I wanted to stay in that peace forever, but I knew something was still missing. There was more to understand, more to experience. It was then that I noticed them. They appeared slowly, one by one, as if they were stepping out from the very fog that enveloped me. They were not human, yet not entirely abstract either. They were symbols, embodiments of forces that had ruled my life without me even knowing it. They stood in front of me, each one more imposing than the last, and each one carrying with them a deep, unsettling truth. They were here to show me what I had been avoiding, what I had refused to confront within myself. The first was a man, no, a shadow of a man, clad in tattered robes, his face obscured by a hood. He carried a chain, dragging it along the ground, making a sound like the clinking of iron against stone. His presence was oppressive, suffocating. The weight of his chains seemed to pull the very air down, pressing against my chest as though I could barely breathe. And I knew, instinctively, that this figure represented something deep within me, something I had long ignored but carried with me wherever I went. This was the figure of addiction, a force I had fought against in various ways but never fully faced. Not just the addiction to substances, but the addiction to distractions, to numbness, to escape. The addiction to control, to the idea that I could fix everything on my own without surrendering to something greater. This figure, this shadow, was the physical manifestation of my own attempts to escape from my pain, my need to hide from the truth. As I stood there, the figure moved toward me. I wanted to run, to turn away, but something within me stopped me. I couldn't escape this encounter. The shadow stopped in front of me and lifted its head. I still couldn't see its face, but I felt its gaze, cold, judging, yet somehow compassionate. And then it spoke, its voice a rasping whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Just as the shadow of addiction loomed over me, another figure emerged from the mist. This one was not cloaked in darkness. Instead, it was bathed in an unsettling light, a light that flickered like a flame on the verge of going out. It was a woman, her face serene yet empty, holding a mirror that reflected nothing but darkness. She stood silently, the only sound being the soft crackling of the light that surrounded her. This was the figure of emptiness, a mirror that reflected nothing. This woman, this symbol, represented the hollow parts of my soul, the parts that I tried to fill with possessions, accomplishments, and distractions. The emptiness I had tried so hard to ignore, so afraid to confront, because it made me feel like I wasn't enough. I had always feared that if I looked too deeply into myself, I would find nothing but void. And yet, here it was, right in front of me. The woman with the mirror spoke, her voice like the whisper of wind through dead branches. You fear me, Ahmad, because you think that if you look into me, you will disappear. But you will only disappear if you choose to remain blind. The emptiness you feel is not your death. It is the space where truth is waiting to be revealed. In that moment, I realized that I had been afraid of the emptiness inside me for so long because I thought it would consume me. I had believed that facing it would mean facing a loss of everything I had built, everything I had fought for. But what I didn't understand until that moment was that the emptiness wasn't a void of nothingness. It was a space, a sacred space for something greater, something that could fill me, heal me, and complete me. That emptiness was waiting for Christ. And then, from the mist, emerged the last figure. This one was not clothed in shadow or light, but in a cloak of flames, flickering, wild, and untamed. A man, tall and imposing, his face obscured by the fire that seemed to burn without consuming. His eyes, however, pierced through the flames, eyes full of fury, grief, and understanding. I felt an overwhelming heat emanating from him, as though I was standing in the presence of something both destructive and transformative. This was the figure of division, a force that had torn at the fabric of my own life, at the fabric of the world around me. The flames that surrounded him were not just flames of anger, but of the isolation I had felt, divisions within my own heart, the walls I had built between myself and others, the hatred, the bitterness, the pride that separated me from the people I loved, the world I lived in. This figure was everything that kept me from understanding the full love and grace of God, everything that told me I was different, that I was better, that I had a right to hold grudges and make excuses. That was the moment when everything began to click. I had spent my life keeping people at arm's length, holding on to grudges, feeding the division in my own heart. And the longer I held on to that division, the further I drifted from the truth, from the love that could heal me, that could unite me with those I had separated myself from. Each of these figures, addiction, emptiness, division, they were more than just representations of struggles. They were mirrors, showing me the parts of myself that I had buried, ignored, or allowed to control me. And standing before them, I realized that I could no longer deny the truth. I had to confront these forces within me. Only then could I truly experience the peace and love that Christ was offering me. I had faced the shadows, the empty mirrors, and the flames of division. I had been shown the deepest parts of myself, the places I had buried and hidden away from the world and even from myself. But none of that prepared me for the moment when I would come face to face with the one who could truly heal me, the one whose love would shatter every lie, every fear, every chain I had ever carried. There, standing before me in the midst of that vast, unearthly space, was Christ. He wasn't a figure from a book. He wasn't a distant, unattainable ideal. He was real. His presence filled the space, surrounding me with a light that was not blinding, but inviting, like the warmth of the sun on your face after a long, cold night. His eyes met mine, and it felt as if he could see right into my soul, the parts of me I had hidden away for so long. And in that gaze, I felt no condemnation. I felt only love. His face was full of compassion, full of understanding. There was no judgment, no reproach, just love. I had spent so many years running from this truth, from the idea that someone could love me this unconditionally, that someone could see me for who I truly was, and still offer me grace. But here he was, standing before me, showing me the truth I had so long avoided. I knelt before him. I didn't even know why, but I knew that I had to. I had to bow before the love that was more powerful than any fear I had ever known. And as I knelt there with my head bowed, I could feel the chains that had held me for so long. The chains of addiction, the chains of emptiness, the chains of division, beginning to fall away. It wasn't just a symbolic act. I could feel it. The weight of my burdens was lifting. It was as if I was shedding layers of darkness, layers of doubt and despair. And what was left was a heart that was finally open to receiving the love I had always longed for. I could feel him near. His hand, gentle but firm, rested on my shoulder. And with that touch, I felt an overwhelming wave of peace wash over me. It wasn't just a sense of calm. It was something deeper. It was the kind of peace that doesn't come from the world, the kind of peace that only comes from Christ, the kind of peace that heals the deepest wounds, the kind of peace that passes all understanding. Then he spoke. His voice wasn't loud, but it was firm. It cut through the noise in my mind, the doubts that had clouded my thoughts for so long. As he spoke, I felt something inside of me crack wide open. It wasn't just the release of years of pain. It was the breaking of something much deeper, something I had not even known I was holding on to. I had spent my life thinking that I had to fix myself, that I had to be perfect to deserve love, to deserve peace. But here he was, telling me that I didn't need to be perfect. I just needed to come as I was, broken, flawed, but willing to accept his love. And in that moment, I realized the truth. I didn't have to do anything to earn his love. It was already there, waiting for me. As I rose from my knees, I felt a lightness in my chest, a sense of freedom I had never known before. It wasn't just a relief, it was a transformation. The chains that had held me for so long had been shattered, and I was free. Free from the addiction that had tried to control me. Free from the emptiness that had haunted me. Free from the divisions that had kept me separated from others. I was free to love, free to forgive, free to accept the grace that had always been offered to me. And I knew, in that moment, that everything had changed. My life would never be the same again. I wasn't the same person. I had been redeemed, not by anything I had done, but by the grace of Christ. And I understood, for the first time, what it meant to truly be free. I had been living in the shadows, hiding from the truth, searching for peace in all the wrong places. But in the presence of Christ, I found the peace I had been seeking for so long, the peace that surpasses all understanding, the love that never fails. And it was in that love that I found my redemption, my freedom, my purpose. I want to share this with you because I know there are so many of you out there who are carrying the same burdens I once carried. The fear, the shame, the doubt, the pain. But I want you to know that you don't have to carry it alone. You don't have to search for peace in the empty places of this world. Christ is here, and He is offering you His love, His peace, His redemption. All you have to do is accept it. Come to Him as you are, and He will give you rest. Christ didn't come for the perfect. He came for the broken. And in His arms, I found everything I had been looking for. When I returned from that place, from the presence of Christ, I didn't just return physically. I came back a different person. My heart had been changed. The weight of my burdens, the addictions, the emptiness, the division I had carried for so long was gone. It was as if a veil had been lifted, and I could see the world around me with new eyes. The things I had once held dear no longer held the same power over me. The distractions, the things that kept me from truly living, no longer had a hold on me. One of the first things I did was delete the apps that had consumed so much of my time. Social media had been a way for me to escape, to numb the emptiness I felt inside. But now, I knew that true connection and peace didn't come from endless scrolling or comparing myself to others. It came from God, from prayer, and from meaningful relationships. I deleted the apps, not because they were evil, but because I realized they were keeping me from something greater. I also started to pray more intentionally. I had always prayed, but it had often felt like a routine, something I did because I was supposed to, something that wasn't coming from a place of real connection. But now, I prayed with purpose. I began each day thanking God for the new life I had found in Christ. I asked for guidance, for strength, for the wisdom to live in alignment with His will. Prayer became the lifeline that I had been searching for. It was no longer an obligation. It was an invitation to commune with the Creator of the universe, the one who loved me enough to meet me where I was. Another significant change was in how I approached my relationships, especially with my family. Before my encounter with Christ, I had been distant. My struggles with division, with pride, had kept me from truly connecting with those closest to me. But now, I saw them through new eyes. I sought forgiveness from those I had wronged, and I began to rebuild the relationships that had been broken. I took time to be present, to listen, and to love with the kind of love that Christ had shown me. I realized that true healing isn't just about ourselves, it's about others too. Christ didn't come to heal just one person, He came to heal the world. And that healing starts with us. It starts with loving those around us, forgiving them as we have been forgiven, and extending grace where we once held grudges. It starts with becoming the kind of person who reflects the love of Christ in every action, in every word, in every thought. You may be wondering, how do you start? Where do you go from here? Let me tell you, the first step is simple. Surrender. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be willing to come as you are. Christ is waiting for you, just as He waited for me. He is standing at the door of your heart, knocking, asking you to let Him in. The journey begins when you open that door and invite Him into your life. I want to share a verse from Romans 12:2 with you. It says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect." This is the call to action for all of us. We are not meant to live as the world lives, chasing after empty things. We are meant to be transformed by Christ's love, by His peace, by His truth. I encourage you today to reflect on your own life. What is holding you back? What burdens are you carrying that you no longer need to carry? What distractions are keeping you from the peace you've been searching for? I promise you, Christ is the answer. He is the peace. He is the way, the truth, and the life. He is the one who can heal every wound, break every chain, and offer you the freedom you long for. Take that first step. Surrender to Him. Open your heart. Ask Him to come into your life and transform you the way He transformed me. It's not a one-time event. It's a journey, one step at a time. But I promise you, it's a journey worth taking. Remember, you don't have to do it alone. Christ is with you every step of the way. And when you allow Him to lead you, He will guide you to a peace that surpasses all understanding.